Good morning, everyone. My name is Phyllis, and I'm one of the pastors here at New City. Glad to be with all of you this morning. We're going to continue our series on the unhurried life, God's rhythm of rest. And so for the next several weeks, including last week, we're going to examine what a life live with the rhythm of rest might look like and how Jesus modeled this for us. But I'm wondering this morning, how many of us can say that we are good at resting? Just raise your hand. If you're great at resting and you think you're good at that, you raise your hand. Okay. There's a few of you. Can I learn from you? Because I am terrible at resting. It is something that I am not very good at, and I have taken a lot of time in therapy to dig into why I am not good at resting. And I think part of it is from growing up in an immigrant household where working hard to make ends meet was integral to survival. Some of you guys might relate to that. Another part of it is how I'm wired and my personality. I'm just naturally a doer. It's just how God has made me. And then another part of it, I really think, is our society and culture. We live in a world that applauds the grind and the hustle. And this has actually bled into our church life and to our spiritual life. We want to hustle, and we want to be as productive as possible in our walk with God, to work hard to be saved, and to produce the fruit of the Spirit, despite the fact that Scripture tells us that we have been saved by grace and not by works. And when you're a doer like me, it's hard to pause and rest and not live life in a hurry. So growing up in Seattle, I've always known that as an overachieving kid who was super uptight and a go-getter, that's just who I was. My mom can tell you. The pace of life in Seattle just didn't really match me at all. I don't know if you guys know anything about Seattle or just West Coast in general, but it's definitely way more relaxed. I long for the fast pace and bright lights of New York City, where people walked fast, they talked fast, and they just lived fast. And so when I turned 18, I set my sights for the East Coast, and I ended up in Philadelphia, and it was there that I finally felt like I could relax. Funny, right? I met all these people who were driven. I mean, even more driven than me. And everything happened fast, and I loved it. I reveled in it. I was a queen of overcommitment and doing all the things. And so when I returned to Seattle a couple years later and reunited with some old high school friends, I distinctly remember my friends saying to me, "Wow, Phyllis, you seem a lot more chill than when you were in high school." And inside, I would nod and say to myself, "Of course, because I finally found my people, you slowpokes." It felt wrong to be still. My favorite phrase at the time was, "I'll sleep when I'm dead." And this is the same attitude that I took to my spiritual life. I didn't understand Jesus' need to go away to pray and to be alone. I felt confused that he could sleep on the boat in the middle of a storm when his disciples were all freaking out. I was like, what is wrong with Jesus? So when I first discovered the Hebrew word Selah, I dismissed it. Because who has time to pause? Who cares about what that word is? It's just some random word in a whole bunch of Psalms. Well, we're going to pause right now, and we're going to consider that word, Selah. So it's a Hebrew word, and although most scholars would tell you that this word represents a pause and reflect, I would venture to agree with some of the other theologians who have said that this word is actually still a mystery in its ancient meaning. And I think that's why in the Bible, sometimes it's missing in some versions, other times it's not even translated. And so the word Selah just appears. Because something always gets lost in translation, right? There's words for things. Like there's a Korean word called chong, And there's no English equivalent to it. And I feel like the same thing with Selah. There is no exact English equivalent to it. But for our intents and purposes today, we're going to go with the meaning that this word represents a pause and a moment to reflect, a sacred pause, in fact. And so we're going to read through Psalm 46 in the NRSV version, and you're going to see the word Selah dotted throughout the psalm. And you can read through this. Okay. I want to say that in these verses, the word Selah is present at 3 different points that I think the psalmist is trying to make here. And the first set comes after verses 1 through 3, where it says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. Selah. You see, the story that I got when I first became a Christian was that all my troubles will go away and that my life would be smooth sailing. And whenever hardships did come by or troubles came by, the narrative that I heard in my head and was told was that this was because I was not being faithful, or I was actively sinning, or I wasn't Christian enough. Now, let me just clear this. Not being Christian enough, that's not a real thing. So if anyone tells you that, you're just like, that's not true. We're not even going to talk about that because that's just not a thing. I do think that sometimes there are consequences to our actions or inactions. So I could understand and see how I could have adopted that narrative. And maybe some of you have also had the same narrative in your head that there's sin, or that you're not being faithful, right? But I want to point out something really important. Jesus actually never said that our troubles will go away when we started following him. In John 16, Jesus actually tells his disciples that it's going to be hard when he is gone. It was already tough following Jesus because he was doing such weird things. But he warns them and he encourages his disciples and finally ends his talk with them by saying, I have said this to you so that in me you may have peace. In the world you face persecution, but take courage. I have conquered the world. And so in the same vein, we can read these 3 beginning verses in Psalm 46. You see, the promise of God is that God is our refuge and strength, our ever-present help when we are in trouble. And therefore, that's an important word. This is pointing to the reason of why we do not have fear, despite all the things that are going on in this world, and why we can actually continue to have hope. In our world today, it's in trouble. There is war, there is fire, there's active oppression, genocide, kidnapping, murder. The mountains are shaking. The earth is changing. The waters of the sea are roaring, and the people are groaning. All seems hopeless. And I feel that way many days. It is anxiety producing. And because I'm a doer, I want to solve all the problems. Are you like that? When troubles come, you want to come up with a solution, and maybe, like me, you work hard to come up with the programs and the resource lists, and you attend all the trainings, and you do everything you can in your power to try to make things right. But lately, at least for me, the onslaught is just too much. Every day there is another thing that I have to try to solve. And here's what the first 3 verses are trying to tell us with its first sacred pause. For many of us, our natural response in times of trouble is anxiety, or it's striving, or it's something like self-reliance. But what God is telling us here is that in the midst of all these things that are out of our control, God is here. God is our refuge and strength, our very present help in times of trouble. It is the peace that Jesus was talking about, that peace that comes to take over the fear, and the peace that comes to help us still continue to cling onto hope when all seems hopeless. It encourages us to have an active trust and faith because God is trustworthy. But we have to be still. We actually have to pause in order for us to embrace God in our moments of chaos in life in general. We get so busy and we are running and not taking a moment to stop, and we feel that we have to do more, or we have to prove ourselves, or we unintentionally think that we have to earn our way to God's love and grace. And so this brings us to the second point the psalmist is reminding us of in verses 4-7. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city, it shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in an uproar, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. I don't know about you, but for me, I forget that God is God. And what I mean is that, you see, we don't see God. We go about our lives not fully realizing who God is, and oftentimes we kind of put God into our own box of our own perspective. And have you all heard the phrase, out of sight, out of mind? Right? Some of us are just wired like that. If we don't see someone, we just don't even think about them. I think that's the way I am sometimes with God. Out of sight, out of mind. But these verses in verse 4-7, they're reminding us to actually shift our perspective. There is a river, even when it doesn't seem like it, or it seems like it's dried up. There is a river, and God is in the midst of the city. The psalmist is reminding us this is God, God who utters their voice and the earth melts. It is God who with their voice created the heavens and the earth and everything in it. God is with us, Emmanuel. God is our refuge, our protector, our river, the giver of life, our wellspring, our creator. And so when we pause, when we are still, we remember who God is. And then we remember who we are. Silence, stillness. These are spiritual recalibrators to help us realign with God. And when we are not calibrated to the specifics, it's easy to get misaligned. When I was starting my first job, my dad gave me his old car. It was this deep green Jeep Cherokee Sport that had a hand crank to roll down the windows, because he was like, if you ever fall into a lake, those, like automatic windows are never going to help you, so you gotta have a hand crank. That's just how my dad was. So my brother and I were going to drive this car across the country from Seattle to Philadelphia, and I won't even get into the story of why I never got my license until like 2 days before I had to leave for this trip. But that's just another story, okay? So before we left, my dad made sure that we had made all the checks on the car, rotated tires, and all of that. And now I don't know much about cars, although I do love all the fancy bells and whistles they have on them lately, like the seat cooler, seat warmer, all that kind of stuff, right? So I don't really pay attention to I wasn't paying attention to what my dad was telling me about good car maintenance and, responsible car ownership, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. I was just like, how come we don't have automatic windows? So one day I'm driving, and this is probably a really bad habit, but I like to eat my lunch or breakfast while I'm driving. I still do that to this day. And so I let the steering wheel go because I did remember my dad telling me that the car should steer straight as long as I'm already going straight. Okay, so this is one of my problems. I never believed that. And so I used to drive really to the right side because I was afraid of that middle. Okay, this is getting too much into why I am a really good driver. Roger would probably disagree, but I think I'm a good driver. So anyway, suddenly I'm driving and I let go of the steering wheel because I'm on this super straight road and I'm eating my hamburger or whatever. And suddenly I feel the car just veer to the right. And so then I do my best to, straighten it back out, but then I drop my hamburger all over myself. I've got ketchup and mustard, whatever. And then I was so confused because my expectation was that I was going to go straight. But what I had not realized in the maintenance check was that I had never bothered to see if the car's axle was aligned correctly. And because it wasn't aligned properly, some of the treads on my tires were extra worn, right? This happens. And of course, the car didn't drive straight. And so then as soon as I took it in to get the alignment check, the car began going straight even when I let go of the steering wheel. For some of us, you may have been a Christian for a long time. And you think this is a set it and forget it kind of life. Where as long as you check off the boxes and you keep coming to church, you don't really have to pause. You don't have to take the time to realign yourself with God. And then for others of us, you might not even realize that you're misaligned with God. And then there will be some of us who were never actually aligned with God in the first place. And we may just be trying and striving hard to live good and moral lives. We may be trying to live life where we have a certain checklist that we need, that we feel we need to complete in order for God to bless us or for God to be present. We may separate out our church life and the rest of our life rather than being fully integrated. Or we think that if we love enough, pay tithe enough, do good enough, whatever it might be enough, then we somehow have this power to change things, to save our family members, to make our partner choose us over their addiction. But the reality of this is that God is in control, even when it doesn't seem like it and the world seems upside down. God is still in control, and God is actually asking us to surrender our control so that we can be aligned to love like God, to extend grace like God, to bring peace like God, to lavish mercy like God, to fight for justice like God, to be compassionate like God, to be hospitable like God. You get the idea. When you are aligned with God, you will make different choices. You will see people differently, and you will walk this journey with confidence and peace in the midst of your troubles. And finally, the last point in verses 8 through 11 that I believe the psalmist is saying is that we will know God more in our pause, and we will experience God's presence and be strengthened. And I want to hone in, though, on verse 10 in particular. We started our morning with that breath prayer. Here, God is saying to us, be still and know that I am God. And this seems so simple, yet it is one of the hardest things for us to do. Because Sabbath is not simply about rest or getting more sleep or going on vacation. Sabbath is actually about Selah. A sacred pause, the recalibration of our souls, the alignment check. And I'll be honest, moving here to LA has been full of a lot of big and hard challenges for me as well as for my family. And being a pastor, well, I'm just going to be really honest. There are some days that I feel really discouraged. And I wonder if God called the right person here. And I doubt and I question, is this where I'm supposed to be? Am I loving this church enough? What more can I do for this church? How do I work harder to make things right here in LA? What programs or things should I do to help our unhoused siblings? Should I run that recovery group? And the list goes on, and some days it feels so overwhelming and daunting. And then I hear God telling me to stop, to breathe, reminding me You are one person. And you are not a savior, but you are a servant. I hear God saying to me, do you think you love this church more than me? Addie, Scott, Cam, Jenny, Edna, Donna, David, Angie, Anthony, Linda, Zoe, Mina, Oscar, Will, Gio, Daniel, Maya, Curtin, every single person out there, not just in LA, but in this world, they are my beloved. I know every one of the hairs on their head, and I am their creator, and I love them. And so I stop, and I become still, quieting my heart, my head, and my soul in humility, remembering that God is God. Breathing in, be still, and breathing out, know that I am God. Breathing in, the Lord is my shepherd, and breathing out, I have all that I need. Beloved, will you practice the sacred pause today and this week and this month? Will you allow Jesus to recalibrate your soul in stillness? I want to end our time with a practical way for us to practice some stillness and some sacred pausing. It's this thing called Lectio Divina, and maybe you have done it before, but it's this contemplative way to read a sacred text. And the text that we're going to read is Isaiah 61, verses 1 to 2. And there's going to be prompts on this video for us to read, so get yourself in a comfortable position. Some of you may want to sit, some of you may want to kneel, or some of you may want to stand, or maybe you want to move to the aisle, or you want to come down here to the front. Some of you may want some paper to write things down. Some of you may want to close your eyes after reading the passage. You're going to hear a chime, and that's going to help you transition to that next part and so forth. And then at the conclusion of this time, I'm going to come back up, and we're going to do communion together, and we're going to join Jesus at the table in our sacred pause together as a community. So can we play the video?